Niko House, welcome to the show.
What's going on, Kim? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's good to have you. Are you social distancing? Are you doing everything you're supposed to be doing down there in Florida? I know that you Floridians are having a hard time sticking to the rules, they say.
Yeah, actually, so I've been pretty good about it. Like I've made sure to keep my distance, and I went to the beach once, but it was like to go on a walk with my wife, and we were way away from everybody. And everybody in that scenario, like they're mostly residents, they were all like way away. They were spaced out. But you are correct because the coronavirus pandemic kind of peaked here at the exact same time as spring break. It was a horrible time for the coronavirus to peak. And I'm not joking. I went to go pick my wife up from work right before we went into quarantine. I live about 2 miles away from her job on South Beach, her old job before she got laid off because of the Rona. It would have taken me 2 hours to get across the bridge because of spring break. I'm like, hold up. I thought that we were in the middle of a pandemic. It don't matter. Spring break don't stop for nobody. So
no kidding.
I've been pretty good. I've been pretty good. Me and my wife haven't been doing a good job of the social distancing, but I think that's okay.
Yeah, I've been seeing people criticize married couples who are not, who are standing really close to one another and not social distancing. So they say, and it's like, come on, guys, I think we're taking that a little bit too far.
Wow, they would be really upset about what we did last night then, because we were not 6 foot apart.
I wonder if there's going to be a virus, like a virus baby boom.
Where I think so. I think it'll be a combination of both the baby boom and divorce rate will both go.
Right. Well, in China, they were saying that the divorce rates are going way up. But I think a lot of it, too, is right now, everybody's in a holding pattern. So if you were planning on filing for divorce in these last couple of months, you have to wait. And then suddenly when everybody's let free, then everybody's rushing to file their divorce, or everybody's rushing to get married at once, or there's going to be a lot of funerals when this is over, because a lot of people,
weddings too.
A lot of weddings, a lot of funerals, a lot of divorces. I think we're going to see a lot of, what everybody's been kind of waiting for, these life events, a lot of moves, a lot of, and I'm sure there's going to be, unfortunately.
My move got postponed because of that. So.
Yeah. And I'm sure we're going to see a spike in evictions, because they're holding off the evictions, but they're not going to end them. They are going to have more evictions.
It's still weird. Isn't it bizarre? Like they put in the legislation that you can't evict somebody, or at least start the court proceedings for like 3 months, 120 days, something to that degree.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is, one, ain't you still going to owe them the money? And two, did they really actually do anything? Because to my understanding, almost every state has ceased the Supreme Court isn't even doing anything right now. Mm-hmm. We just submitted a writ of certiorari for the DNC fraud lawsuit, and it's going to be there till at least September now.
Yeah. It's going to take forever. I mean, if you want to evict somebody after this is over, it's still probably going to take a really long time, depending on the state. Yeah, so
I agree. But it's weird how you see these politicians kind of patting themselves on the back, after giving out these massive bailouts. Oh, look what we did. We protected you all. It's like, hold on. The courts already said they're not convening right now. Mm-hmm. At least, and they're talking about 120 days. I've seen court systems in North Carolina that are saying they're not even resuming criminal cases until a bare minimum September.
So a couple of pieces of news that I want to talk about. First of all, some really stunning data coming out of Chicago that the virus is hitting Black Americans harder than white Americans. In fact, here's from the Washington Post. It's saying in Chicago, Black Americans account for 68% of the city's 118 deaths and 52% of the roughly 5,000 confirmed virus cases, despite making up just 30% of the city's population. Goes on to say that means they are dying at a rate nearly 6 times that of white Chicagoans, a striking disparity that is also starting to emerge in other major cities. So we don't have the data coming out of New York, but I've heard anecdotally that people are saying it is disproportionately, the people that are dying are disproportionately Black Americans. Have you been reading this? What do you think of this? Why would this be? Because they're saying that the care is no different. Once they get into the hospitals, it's not because their hospitals are poorer or they're not having access. They're getting the same treatment. Mm-hmm. So what is this?
So I do have to say there's a caveat to that. Hospitals have always treated Black patients differently than their white patients. Like this is like a thing. Like there's a whole study about it. And then we can get into that later. But even still, I think that the reality is, especially in places like Chicago and New York, so the virus is going to have a higher chance to kind of fester and grow and develop and harm more people because it's a cold weather. Both of those states, cold weather states, cold weather cities, especially Chicago. Good God, Chicago is miserable. That wind on that lake is ridiculous. I don't know why people choose to live there. Now in Chicago specifically, South Side Chicago, these areas that are, primarily located in urban, low income areas that is dominated by Black people, where these people are eating, they're not eating healthy. Like whenever I was poor and I lived in Fayetteville, North Carolina, we had a lot of ramen, a lot of honey and bread, a lot of McDonald's dollar menu, and your food directly, what you consume directly affects your immune system. Mm-hmm. So you're not really putting yourself in a position to be healthy anyway, right? No matter what. Before the virus got here, it was highly likely that you got something else, or at least you were susceptible to something else. So in the article that you were talking about, in the New York Times, they were talking about the fact that Black people have a higher likelihood of having diabetes and therefore
heart disease.
And heart disease and high blood pressure. And these are things that we have kind of always known. And we have also known just from the last couple of months, at least according to the information we have now, a lot of these the virus has a higher likelihood of killing somebody that has a comorbidity like diabetes.
Right. Or heart disease. Heart disease, I think, is like number one.
Heart disease is a big one for Black people in general, especially Black people who live in the South or migrated from the South. For some reason, I think it's the food. I'm not gonna lie to you. Pretty sure it's the soul food.
The diet. Well, the soul food is very delicious. Not gonna lie.
But you gotta take care of yourself now. I've
not
always
healthy.
been a big proponent about that. As a Black man myself, even though I'm mixed, like you basically get the anatomy for the most part of mostly the white side or the Black side. A lot of people think you get the best of both worlds all the time. It's not necessarily that way. But in the Black community, we have to take care of ourselves because of our diets and things like that. You have to work out. You got to be mindful of things.
But that's hard to do when you're poor. I mean,
exactly.
When I look at this, this to me shows, because obviously it's not just a Black-white thing. This virus has gone around the world, and we've seen it ravage certain areas. And I haven't really looked into, exactly what the conditions are in Iran, where the virus really hit. But I do know that in Italy, one of the things the Germans have been saying for the last probably about a month now, the German researchers have come out saying, well, we've got a big problem in northern Italy. For one, it is the most polluted area of that country. Yeah. And there's a high rate of smoking amongst the Italians. So when you have pollution in the air and you have smoking, this is going to contribute to the inability to breathe, which is, causing obviously the need for people to go on the ventilators or whatever. So when you look at, and plus the Italians have a very unhealthy diet. I can tell you they eat a lot of bread. It's not the pasta everybody thinks, oh, they eat all this pasta. They actually don't eat nearly as much pasta as they eat bread. Loads
Especially
and loads.
Northern Italians love bread. Bread is everywhere.
Yeah, it's all over the place.
Italian restaurant,
yeah. They eat a lot of seafood, so they tend to have a pretty healthy diet as far as Mediterranean diet goes. A lot of olive oil, a lot of seafood, but they do eat tons and tons of bread. And so they're not, the older the Italians get, they get plumper. They start turning into these like really round people, and that obviously means diabetes. That obviously means heart disease. That obviously means just having these issues, right? So.
Damn, man. Every culture that's known for eating good, man. We just do it
I know.
for ourselves.
Oh, if it's delicious, it's not good for you. That's the problem, right? That is
got to figure out how Asians or how East Asians are managing to make great food and still live to 150 years old.
And that's what's interesting about this. Like, let's take a look at the numbers. When we look at Asia, we say, well, it's because they were able to tamp down on this really quickly. That's why the virus didn't seem to affect them as badly. They didn't have nearly as many deaths. Or maybe it could be that we all know Asians tend to be healthier overall. Asians have lower rates. In fact, they're finding that even in the studies when they're looking at here in the United States, when they're breaking down, who's being affected by this virus, Black Americans, white Americans, Hispanic, and Asians. Asians, though, they said in Chicago make up 7% of the population, are only accounting for 3% of the virus deaths. So. Wow. Yeah. So there's also, there is that.
So there might be a diet. So one's diet seems to be very much so connected to whether or not, not necessarily getting the virus, but at least dying from the
Surviving it.
virus, surviving it
Right.
once you
Surviving
get
it.
it.
Yeah.
And I would say that's probably, honestly, that's probably not all that different from the flu, right? If you're staying up all night,
No,
if you're not,
no, actually the flu doesn't have this quite.
it
The
doesn't have
flu,
that correlation.
no, not as much. This virus is seeming to really go after just unhealthy folks. Like the less healthy you are.
Damn.
It's not just
America we got a wave coming.
well, all around the world. I mean, it's kind of a wake-up call, I think, for the whole world on this. Although, only with this virus, the next pandemic could be something totally different that, like the Spanish flu. The Spanish flu in 1918 was taking healthy adults. It mainly killed off people in their 20s and 30s. And they were people that were, healthy by that day's standards. I don't know what that would be by today's standards, but so, each virus is a bit different. The flu itself, when you look at the regular flu, there's really no regular flu. Each year it changes because it mutates. But if you look at, last year's flu, which was a kind of a lower one, the year before was particularly deadly. Infants, children, and pregnant women and older people get hit quite a bit with the flu. But this one, kids aren't really getting hit at all. And
that's interesting because kids, I feel like my nephew is always sick. Like I feel like he's always had something.
Yeah, well, kids usually are. They don't have very strong immune systems, so that's why this one's particularly strange. That it's just really seeming to go after people who have those comorbidities that are going to be, and also if you're a type 1 diabetic, it's a really, you could be as healthy as could be, but if you are a type 1 diabetic, if you suffer from any sort of immune disorder,
I wonder if this has something to do with the type of blood you have. Like,
they were saying that, right? They were saying if you're type O that, okay, so it's not by much though. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but basically if you had type A blood, it was like 35% of those diagnosed.
Type A the worst.
Right. And then and then it was type A or B and was a little bit lower. And then O was even lower. And then type AB was extra low.
Yeah. AB negative or AB?
Just it didn't go into positives or negatives, which kind of makes sense when you look at, so my dad is type O, my mom is AB, and I'm A.
I'm O.
So, well, most of America is O.
No. Most of America, I think, is either A or B. Because O negative is one of the rarest blood types.
O negative is, but O positive, I think, is the majority. I think it's the most prevalent. Everybody in my family is O positive, except my mom.
Really?
But my mom is AB positive, but it's very common in Southeast Asia to be AB positive. So in China, it's very common to be A. And so that's why I thought, well, that's interesting that if AB is the lowest and we're not seeing this virus go through Southeast Asia, which AB is the most prevalent blood type of Southeast Asia.
So, hold on. So you're correct. O positive is the most prevalent. A positive is the second most prevalent. It's
I'm A negative.
Different. So I'm O negative, and there's it's.
Oh, you're O negative?
Yeah.
You better be go giving some blood.
Man, look, people used to come after my blood all the time.
Yeah, of course.
Every time. I'm like, yo, I don't want to give away all my blood. But it's actually good to give away blood. It's good to get clean blood in your system.
Well, and plus you have a rare blood. Your blood can be used for anybody and everybody.
Save lives. What can I say? That's why I made myself an organ donor. My mom was really upset about it at first. I'm like, Mom, my organs can literally be used on anybody. So
yeah,
fair. But
right.
Maybe not use my liver. Back in the day.
Even though my whole family is O, they can't give me blood because they're O positive and I'm A negative.
Well, I thought O positive can receive from everybody, right?
No, they can only receive from O positive and O negative. Yeah, it's AB positive. My mom has the blood type there. She can take anyone's blood. She's a universal receiver. I know she's selfish. That's selfish.
Well, so I've done a lot of research into how different blood types affect your immune system. For example, people with A blood or B blood are actually more likely to get cancer.
Oh, thanks for the good news.
Yeah, I know it kind of sucks, but it's not a good thing for you. But for O negative, we're the least by a large margin to get any disease. And I'm immune to tuberculosis. I'm immune to hepatitis. I have a lot of immunities.
Why? Is it because you got the shots or?
No. Actually, funny story about that. So in the military, you're forced to get vaccines. and they don't test your blood before they give you the vaccines. So you can't know if you're immune yet. So then you get the immunities, and then you get your blood tested, and then you go back at some point in basic for your second round. The problem is if they find out that you're immune to something, then you can't get that shot again. And when I asked them, I'm like, well, why can't I get it again? And they were like, well, because it could cause a problem because you're already immune. I said, hold up. Motherfucker, you've already given me this shot, though.
Right.
And they were like, oh, well, yeah.
Can you not cuss on my channel?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Hey, some people are big about that. Look, most people's parents watch.
The children are watching right now.
Oh, don't tell YouTube that. Don't say that. No, it's not true, YouTube. Children don't watch. Good God, you're trying to get kicked off of YouTube.
No kids watch this. No, because I have to click that button every time I upload saying, this is not for children.
Your blood type definitely plays a role into how you should kind of go about your day. Now, so the negative impact is we have more acid in our stomachs. And it's harder for women who have O negative blood to get pregnant. It's harder for men to get women pregnant who have O negative blood.
Well, it's harder for any woman who has a negative blood type to keep the baby.
I didn't know that.
I don't know if it's about getting pregnant, but it's about that's where the term blue babies came from, because the baby's the mother's body tries it, depending if the baby has positive blood type, which usually they do because negative is rare. And if the baby has positive blood, then
it's like a clash.
Yeah, the mother's body tries to, but they have now treatments for that, and it's only after the first kid. If you have a second kid, that's where the danger comes in. It's not so I mean, it's like a whole thing there.
It just seems like, I mean, blood, is a filter, right? Like that's what it basically does. It carries all the cleaning items.
And then the latest now these are just hypotheses. People don't really know, but some of the doctors are wondering if this virus is actually attacking the blood, so it's more of a blood virus. And
that's what my instinct has been too.
Yeah, it's a blood virus that then the lung inflammation is something that comes later. That's like a symptom of it rather than, oh, this is a virus that's attacking the lungs. They're starting to wonder if it's actually a virus attacking the blood and the oxygen levels in the blood, which is why some of the doctors now are starting to say that this is actually more mimicking high altitude sickness and not pneumonia. And that the ventilators then would be damaging to people if they were to be put on the ventilator.
I saw an emergency room doctor.
He's actually an ICU doc.
ICU, there you go. Yeah, and I saw that video and I was kind of like blown away. Like, damn, I was wondering if anybody was going to question whether or not the ventilators were causing any issues, because it seemed to be like there's not one situation in medicine that I've ever witnessed that you can use one, like it's one solution solves for everybody, right? And especially when we don't know what the hell works at this point, right? Do we really know?
Yeah, it's a new thing.
And so when you have a situation where everybody's using ventilators, and then it's like people are dying, and you're like, oh, well, it's the way they were describing it as a puncture in the lungs, and they drown, and da. And I'm like, now, did these people get ventilators? Because you need to figure this out. Because if people are getting corona and then not getting, they may have trouble breathing, but if they're not using the ventilators and they're surviving, then
so just for context, so that people know. So there was a doctor in New York. He's on the front line in New York. He runs an ICU up there. I was sent the video a few days ago, and I researched the guy to make sure it was legit. And he is actually running one of the ICUs in New York in one of the busiest hospitals that's dealing with this virus. And he basically just said, I think we might be treating this wrong. He says, I'm sitting here by the patients, I'm looking at them, I'm watching them, and this doesn't look like pneumonia. Because a lot of times what happens why people die from the flu or from other illnesses is that it turns into pneumonia and they die from complications of the flu. It turned into, their inability to breathe. Yeah. And he was saying, this doesn't look like that. And that would be, that's one of the reasons why we're saying that people, with this virus, it seems that people get sick and then they kind of suddenly get worse and then they suddenly die, right? It's like much faster than maybe a typical pneumonia.
Be because you went to the hospital and got...
Well, high altitude sickness. So what he said is that this doesn't look quite like pneumonia. He was saying this looks more like high altitude sickness. The symptoms are more like high altitude sickness. And the big difference is, with pneumonia, your lungs can no longer operate on their own. That's why you need the ventilator. The ventilator then kind of puts pressure on your lungs to move them, it works your lungs for you. And he was saying, no, This looks like they just need oxygen. They don't need pressure. They need oxygen. And when I then researched the symptoms of high altitude sickness, what's interesting is that it more affects men than it does women, higher rates of death with men.
That's what they said. That's what the virus is happening, right?
Right.
It's affecting men more than women.
Exactly. And that it's very quick death. Like you kind of get it. It kind of comes on suddenly and then rapidly you deteriorate, which is very similar to this one. And we also have heard anecdotal evidence coming out of the hospitals that high dose IV vitamin C therapy seems to be really working for these patients. That would make sense because vitamin C, you know that every time you get on a plane, your vitamin C depletes. So,
yes, I did that.
Right. So they're saying, and vitamin C helps, I believe, your blood and is something to do with oxygen in your blood is what vitamin C helps. So that would make sense why vitamin C therapy seems to work. And so anyway, now, he's been kind of sounding the alarm bells because the problem with the doctors inside the hospitals is a lot of times they have to get approval from the administrators and from researchers before they can change treatment protocols. They don't really sometimes have the leeway to do what they want. They have to go through the hierarchy and the red tape. So he was kind of sounding the alarm bell saying, we need everybody to focus on this because we need people to start changing maybe how we handle this virus early on.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
now,
he felt the need to make a damn video about it. I'm like, man,
right.
You kind of put yourself at risk to a degree by doing that.
Yeah. But now I know NYU in New York is starting to, they're putting together a clinical trial testing this hypothesis. And also I know that they're already, they already seem to know this or are kind of on board with this already in Russia. Because they're talking about it there. And then I think Italians are starting to say maybe that's the thing as well, that maybe these people just need oxygen. They don't need pressure. They just need oxygen early on.
I feel like so I have asthma. And two things I was prescribed other than albuterol, which is your inhaler, is a steroid, which it reduces over time the inflammation of the lungs that you're supposed to take once a day, even if you have only exercise induced asthma, because it limits the opportunity for a flare-up to happen even if you're working out and doing things like walking up the stairs and things like that. And so I thought to myself, like, have we tried kind of like de-inflaming the lungs first and then giving them oxygen, like through an inhaler or something like that, like, or actually
maybe.
And because I feel like with the ventilator, you might be overworking the lungs. You know what I'm saying? Because they're already having trouble breathing, right? That's why you say, oh, let me give them the ventilator. But I feel like the ventilator kind of replaces I don't know, there's something that happens right before, like, that causes your lungs to expand, like the muscle that causes your lungs to expand. I can't remember what it is. And it's doing like that job, but I think that muscle is fine. It's not that, it's literally the lungs.
That's what they're thinking might be the case. Some of these doctors that are kind of witnessing what's going on at the bedside of the patients, that's what they're saying. So we're going to have to wait and see, how that all pans out. It's really, really interesting. And it's scary. It's like if you're one of the first ones to get this thing and they're experimenting on you, whereas now they're like, wait a minute, after, tons of people have died. Now they're saying we might have been treating this wrong the whole time. And maybe the ventilators were causing damage.
Why they thought that was the correct solution to begin with.
Well, because usually viruses often turn into pneumonia. And that's like a pretty typical thing. So, and it looks the same. And in fact, high altitude sickness for years and years was misdiagnosed as pneumonia. So that is, it's pretty, it looks very, very similar.
What the hell? So why didn't they think about it? Oh man. Sometimes I feel like
this doctor did think about it, and luckily he's starting to sound the alarm. And other doctors are listening and saying, yeah, you know what, we agree. This is looking similar. But some doctors say, well, no, not always. And that's probably true too, because you probably have patients who already have compromised lungs and then they catch the virus, and it's not just for them high altitude. Their lungs really do start right for them. And so they would absolutely need the ventilator. It would obviously be patient to patient, but at least if they could, if they're looking and paying attention, then, and hey, listen, doctors, they're not always right. I had a doctor nearly kill me once on accident because yeah, I mean, the doctor thought I was where it looked like I had strep throat. We believed I had strep throat. They said, okay, it's strep. Here's some medications for it, without testing. And in the beginning, it was just like a quick, or like a telemedicine sort of thing. And then, sure enough, it wasn't. It was an abscessed tonsil. that had to be surgically removed right away. Like when I finally went into the doctor's office and I was like, I'm not getting any better. And they took a quick look in and they were like, uh-oh, emergency room, we need to whisk you off and do a little surgery right now. And I'm like, right now? And they're like, right
strep
now.
throat is not something that you should like do over the phone. Like if they thought that was strep throat, they should have had you come.
It was kind of my own fault. I was like, I can't get
yeah,
out of bed.
That's when the doctor got to step up. Because that's what happened to my mom. My mom, so she got diabetes. And it's probably her fault because she used to get Convo cakes and eat them all by herself without sharing with me and my brother. Shame on you, mother. But when they were like, you got to start taking the needle, she's like, I'm not taking that needle. I'm not taking it. I don't want to take it. I'm like, why didn't they just give it to you anyway? Because I told them I wasn't going to take it. Yeah, but it's your doctor. And they just gave her pills. Yeah. And then she literally, we went to the hospital and the doctor, when she walks into the room and immediately was like, I can smell the carbon on her breath. Has she not been taking her insulin? Ugh. I was like, God damn, I don't know what the hell carbon smells like. But that's how bad and the doctor misdiagnosed. And I feel like you're right. We definitely kind of have to be mindful of our own bodies.
Right. And our own health. I mean, we can't just rely 100% on the doctors because they don't always know. For years,
it's a practice for a reason. It's a practice for a reason.
Right. And we have to know our own selves, and we have to kind of pay attention to our own, because they definitely, they are doing their best, right? They're doing their best. So, but, medicine has always changed, and they've many times in the past throughout history, doctors have thought they were treating patients and they were really accidentally killing them. This is not new, but I do think with this particular virus, we are learning more and more about it. I've been sounding the alarm about, I haven't been sounding the alarm, I should say, but I've just been really paying attention to the research on the weather patterns. And, even a couple of weeks ago when I did, or even 3 weeks ago, when I said, hey, the weather looks like there's something to do with it, and said, hey, hunker down, New York. If you live in the northern part of the United States, you should probably really consider some more extreme measures in order to prevent this virus from hitting you.
Yes.
And, that would help us kind of focus where the resources are going. Focus, as we learn more, I think we need to learn to adjust. The thing that's been the most alarming to me is that the people have been unwilling to really adjust to the new information. People they learned one way of doing things, and back in January, February, they had it in their minds that this is the way it's got to be. This is the way we treat this. This is how it is. And when anybody says, hey, maybe this, maybe that, then they kind of call you a conspiracy theorist. And,
which is weird because medicine literally there's not one single time in history that they get it right the first time, which
right, it's always
that's why it scares me. This talk about a mandatory vaccine to combat this virus terrifies me because you're telling me the same people who get, their medicine approved by the FDA, who then get sued after the side effects of that medicine cause, I don't know, cancer and death. And then they're like, we're going to put those people in charge to make a vaccine for this particular situation for the very first time and then make it mandatory.
Yeah, it definitely is. That's very, very scary. But, there have been pushes for mandatory vaccines for a really long time. And, and I'm not an anti-vaxxer by any means, but I'm certainly weary of when I'm told I have to do something.
Yeah,
especially something this new, measles, it's different, right? We've had that vaccine for a while. It's been tested. It's gone through the rigors that you would need in order to test medicine. But this would be rushed, and this would be kind of overnighted. And then suddenly we're all told we have to take it. That is very scary.
The last time that happened was in the 90s because Saddam Hussein was using the depleted uranium in anthrax, basically, that we gave him to use against Iran, but he started using it on us for obvious reasons. And so a lot of the soldiers were getting this, different diseases and having different problems, and then having kids, and it was being passed on to the kids. And so soldiers were then forced to take vaccines, untested vaccines, right before deploying. So there was a major lawsuit against Bill Clinton's government at the time, multi-trillion-dollar lawsuit, because of the problems that came about because of this. Now, fortunately for Bill Clinton, coincidentally enough, all of the evidence was transferred to the Oklahoma City Federal Building right before it exploded. And, just coincidentally enough, he's a very fortunate man like that. And so the lawsuit never got to actually finish going through because they just didn't have any more evidence. But
Mm.
it's never a good thing when you rush something like this and then you try to use it. Once again, there is absolutely no catch-alls. We were just talking about different blood types and how you're being a negative and a positive can change everything about how your body processes the things that you deal with on a daily basis. Now, you try to apply one solution blanketly across the board for everybody, and then you're rushing it, and then you're making it mandatory. No, it doesn't end well. And like you said, I have a problem with anything that's mandatory. The moment they would tell me voting is mandatory, I'd be like, I ain't voting then. Fuck them.
Yeah. Right. Well, with the flu shot, luckily the flu shot is not mandatory. Many of us don't take it. I've never had a flu shot because I'm a bit wary of it. Of course, as I get older in life, probably going to have to take one, but we don't mandate it, and we still have, this year we had a particularly deadly flu season. Last year was a little bit more mild. I think we had 38,000 deaths, but the year before we had about 80,000 deaths in the United States during the flu season, and we still don't mandate that people take it. So if they really, I'd be surprised if they tell everybody we have to take this. But then again, I wouldn't be surprised.
But I say the way that the nation is going, I mean, we're seeing our liberties taken away from us literally every day. And but
it's in the name of safety, Niko. We've got to keep you safe. We've got to keep you secure. That's what we've got to do.
Damn, I know, right? And it's just crazy because I think about, you've worked in the professional field, obviously, before you did your independent thing. And I was in the military and I worked in the professional field. And I think to myself, especially when I was in the military, because like people that I know that I went in with or came in a little bit after, they're like now light colonels, majors, E7s, and like my brother's about to be E7. He's a year younger than me. And I'm thinking to myself, the people making these decisions, I know them. They're not that intelligent. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm being real. Like the people they're not that smart. And when they're like, oh, we have to do this. Well, why? Because you'll be safe. But you just said you don't even know what's causing the problem. So how do we know that this is a guarantee that we'll be safe?
Right,
like,
right.
Like I know there's only one guarantee coming out of this. I'm going to have one less freedom. That's it. That's the only guarantee.
Maybe more than that. Yeah, maybe more.
Yeah, it is more. Exactly. There's a possibility of more than that. But if the only thing that can be guaranteed is a loss of freedom and liberty, then it's historically never been a good idea.
Yeah. Well, I want to switch gears here a little bit. Let's go ahead and talk about the election and what is going on. So Wisconsin, they've decided to just go ahead and move forward with the vote today. What do you think of that? What happened there? What went wrong? Man.
So, well, to be honest with you, I was kind of surprised. But it's probably because the Supreme Court of Wisconsin is predominantly GOP right now, and there's actually a justice up for the Supreme Court in Wisconsin, and he's a pro-Trump guy, and so they were like, well, we want to make sure we get this guy in the office. And so I think that had a part to do with it. But to be honest with you, look, Joe Biden said, oh, this is different. It was weird. He proposed that it was different standing in lines and in crowds to vote than standing in lines and crowds at the grocery store. He said because they disinfect the machines. That was the main reason why. Yeah, I know, it's fucking ridiculous. It was the dumbest shit I've ever heard before in my life. But let's be honest, Joe Biden is like strategically looking for a nail in a coffin for Bernie and trying to find different ways to get him out of the race. And the DNC and various state Democratic parties are also looking for ways to get Bernie Sanders out, like yesterday. And everybody, and to be honest with you, everybody associated with his movement, they're trying to demoralize him. They're trying to demoralize his movement and forcing Wisconsin through. We all know that voter suppression, which I would say that forcing a vote in the middle of a pandemic, literally a state of emergency, is a form of voter suppression. You're not reasonably allowing access to everybody. Like if I'm older, I'm not going.
Right.
I'm not fucking going. If I have diabetes, even if I'm 20, I'm not fucking going. I'm not going to go. Even though I have the option to, I'm not going to go. So is that really an option, or is that the illusion of choice? Because that's really what you're giving people, false choices. So we kind of have hit this crossroad of let's do whatever we can to get progressives or outside or anti-establishment candidates out, even if it means risking lives. That's basically where we're at. And even though, we discussed this on my show, we do have to I feel like we do have to start talking about herd immunity and getting our bodies acclimated to being around this virus and preparing for it in other ways. Just understanding and accepting that, just like the flu, unfortunately, some people will get this and some people will die. So take care of yourself year round to prevent yourself from being one of those victims. But at the same time, we don't have a viable solution that everybody agrees on right now. Other countries have prevented their elections from happening. Other states have prevented their elections from happening. So why in the hell, in a situation where candidates haven't been able to really campaign, nobody usually Bernie would go to Wisconsin,
right? Yeah, I mean, it's like, but they all have to stay in and shelter in place, and especially a place like Wisconsin, because I'm big. Like I said, I follow the weather when it comes to this virus. Wisconsin is right now in that weather pattern for this sucker to spread. Yeah, and it's right. I think, are they still colder than 50? It's because it likes 40 to 50 degree temperatures. So, it's really the time to hunker down and really get serious. If your state or if your area is in that 40 to 50 degree weather pattern and low humidity, you definitely, I think, need to be extra careful. Whereas Florida or California, even now, Arizona, there's a lot of states that I would say, well, if they were to look at it and say, well, we're probably not likely anymore to get hit with this virus. So, okay, then I could kind of understand their justification on this. But with this, it's like, no, guys, you are sitting ducks right now. I would not be doing that.
So they thought it would be a bright idea, instead of expanding the voter locations so you can minimize the amount of crowd buildup, they reduced the voter locations.
I mean, isn't that so ridiculous?
That's the dumbest.
So ridiculous. It's the same thing with the grocery stores here in the United States when they reduced the hours. For the grocery store.
The fuck? What? I don't. Why? I'm about to say, do you know why they did that? Because I don't understand it.
Because they thought that would limit exposure. Whereas in Germany, where they actually think things through very critically, how the Germans are, they were like, no, we are going to expand the hours of the grocery store so that we can actually limit how many people go in at once. And that way, if we have more times of the day where people can go, and then
12 a.m. like, at least, because less people are going to want to go out, but it's going to be less people in the store because of that.
Well, and I think what they were doing even over there, I don't know 100%, but I thought they were actually issuing and saying to each person, okay, this is the time and day when you can go. So it's kind of
here.
Really?
For the old people, though.
Well, for the older people, they're saying you go in the morning. But I think over there, they were actually coordinating. It was like by neighborhood, or whenever it was like, or building by building, your building can go.
Everybody's so much better.
And much more organized.
Yeah. I feel like America is full of fake leaders.
Well, the thing is that, and I think people should remember this, is that the United States is a federation of states. So I know a lot of people want to criticize the federal government's response to this, but a lot of it was on the states. It was the states' responsibility to decide how they were going to respond. And then the federal government typically comes in as support for the federal, for the states.
If the states had decided to give people UBI, they could have made that decision regardless of whether or not the federal government.
Right. Yeah. It could be done on a state level.
And really, if enough states would do it, the federal government would then make sure that all states could do it. That's usually how it works.
Right. And what the federal government could do in a time of pandemic is protect our borders. And that is what Trump did fairly early on. In early February, he did shut down flights from China. He was definitely criticized for that heavily, called a racist. New York.
Yeah, I'm not really. Yeah, I don't think that's racist. Given the situation, that's common sense.
That's what he had to do. I mean, now everybody knows that should have been done even earlier. And now everybody knows that maybe should have even done with Europe. In fact, everywhere, that maybe we should have just closed our borders down and said no one comes in unless you're an American. You can't come in. But, that was criticized heavily to the point where even in New York, I know the city council was saying, like, go out there and enjoy Chinese New Year, celebrate Chinese New Year, go out there in big crowds. Oh, yeah, it's the tweets that are out there where they were promoting, get out there and celebrate, because they were pushing back against Trump shutting down the borders with the United States and China. Right. So that was a failure on the state. And certainly the city, at the city level for New York. But really, people need to remember that the federal government is fairly limited. I mean, they can, in certain times kind of try to take over. And Trump keeps being asked this every day during the press conferences. Why aren't you requiring all the states to do X, Y, Z? And he says, because I believe in the Constitution and each state gets to have their own choice on how they handle this. And it's up to them. If they were totally failing, I would step in, but they're not. They're handling it the way they want to handle it for their state, given the circumstances. And at this point, we don't have any states that are really overwhelmed. We have some states that are whelmed, but not necessarily overwhelmed.
Usually,
right?
And it's only in pockets too.
In pockets, right? Which is,
So I agree, though. I think that the over criticizing of Trump in this particular scenario. Well, I mean, let's be honest. Trump derangement syndrome has reigned supreme since he's gotten elected.
But it's extra high right now, I feel like.
Exactly. And it's kind of sickening because people, I mean, for those of you who don't know, I'm an independent. And I guess I'm a liberal, leftist leaning independent, but I've never really suffered from Trump derangement syndrome. I don't really like him. But it's more so just as a politician, because I don't like 98 or 99%.
I suffered from it. I suffered from it. I did.
Oh, what? At the beginning?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's easy to be susceptible because they make it seem like everything he does is the worst thing in the world.
I was really afraid of him. I thought we had just elected, the next Hitler. I mean, I was in that crowd of people that was like equating him to I had Trump derangement syndrome for sure. And I was a regular, I wasn't doing politics at the time. I was watching CNN and MSNBC all the time. When I had time, I was busy with my own life, doing my, other things that had nothing to do with politics. And I felt like I was still a fairly really informed person. I still followed things much more than many other people. And even I still suffered from, I just believed everything I read, hook, line, and sinker. And then it was as I got into more independent, when I started saying, okay, I'm going to focus on politics and I'm going to actually dive into this because it's something I really love. When I started diving into it is when I started having my existential crisis, when I would read these articles or I'd watch the news and then I would fact check it for myself. I'd research it more. And then I'd be like, wait a minute, it's not quite right. So, so this hysteria isn't quite accurate. Yeah. I mean, blatant lies. But I did suffer from Trump derangement syndrome for sure. And I do have to say that the more I know, and I know many people around me still suffer from it, and there's good reason in some ways. I mean, I definitely don't like the guy. I don't like a lot of the things that he's undone. We have a lot of environmental protection things that he has. He's a Republican. Republicans believe, I don't know if he really is, but
even more so, he has a Republican cabinet, and that's the
right. And they believe in less government regulation. They just say, take away all the regulations, take away all of the protections, and let each state handle itself. Well, when it comes to something like the environment, that's very difficult to do. When you've got one state causing a lot of pollution and other states that are trying their best, right? That's very difficult. We have that problem around the world as well. But yeah, I mean, in this particular time, it's when I'm starting to see the Trump derangement syndrome at an all-time high, where people are willing to risk their own lives and the lives of people around them because of the derangement syndrome. When Trump says, why don't we try the hydroxychloroquine? And then people are like,
why do people have to do that? Why do people
because he said it. But what they don't understand is that Yale Medical has put out a whole thing, a treatment protocol for this virus. And it includes really early on. That what?
I remember seeing that should be considered being used. And it was in an article mentioning that Yale
Medical, like most of the doctors that I've heard from on the front line and all around the world now are actually using it as one of their, as a tool in their arsenal. And yet when it's brought up, when I look at the reaction just from my Facebook or the reactions I see on Twitter or just around, the mainstream news, they're just like, oh, he's practicing snake oil medicine. And it's like, snake oil medicine. I mean, they're running out of hydroxychloroquine. Okay. They know their supply is low. When you ask, why is the supply low? Because only a doctor can get it. They say, well, because the doctors are prescribing it. So it's low. Right. Well, because the doctors are prescribing it not only for themselves, but they said there was an article that was in Fortune magazine. They said that they were like, well, one of the reasons too is that doctors are prescribing it for themselves and their family members. And so they're going in there and they're getting all of this hydro. And it's like, well, only a doctor would only give to his family, to her family, this medicine if she believed that this, because of her medical degree, if she believed that this was good enough for her children and for her, she must believe it to a degree, right? Mm-hmm. But the madness on this, what's really interesting is, it's okay. He shuts down the border and people say, you're a racist. He says, hey, this hydroxychloroquine seems to be doing some, it's looking pretty promising in a couple of different studies and anecdotally the doctors, right? And people, it's snake oil.
He should tell everyone to go use toilet paper like for everything.
And then we'd actually have a supply.
So we can actually have toilet paper in the damn grocery store. That would be
when he says you should stock up.
Vitamin C. If he told everybody to go use vitamin C, everybody would be like, oh my God.
I'm not touching it. There'll be an abundance.
Right. And there would be an abundance. Like y'all can be dumb as shit if you want to. But it's crazy because you're correct. Like some common sense things that you would expect would be, I don't like him, but this is a good thing. Like whenever he was negotiating with Kim Jong-un,
they were like, oh, how dare he? And it's like, would you rather have a Cold War between us and North Korea? That's what you would rather have.
No matter how you slice it, he got the president of South Korea and Kim Jong-un to be on somewhat amicable terms. Like, at least
they were giving each other hugs.
They like each other. By the time the conversation was over, they liked each other more than they liked America.
Right.
They both were talking about it, so they, Kim Jong-un crossed into South Korea for the first time and vice versa. These are lasting achievements that actually will probably have a lasting effect on how that region will operate going forward in the future. And let's be real. Obama had the same opportunity. You know what I'm saying? For as likable of a guy as he was, he had the same opportunity. Did not take advantage of it, whether or not he was told not to or he chose not to. It was a different discussion. But he had the same opportunity to not take advantage of it. He had the same opportunities to pull the CIA out of Syria. Did not do so. There are a lot of things that Obama could have done. Or obviously Trump is not even close to perfect. But what I'm saying is the people who suffer from Trump derangement syndrome, they'll see something like the kids in the cages that are happening right now. And all they see are kids in cages because that's what the media is saying. And they just associate Trump's name with it in the GOP with it because that's literally all they see on TV, right?
Yeah.
From MSNBC, let's be honest, there's clearly a liberal media bias out there in the world.
Oh, for sure. There really is.
And I've acknowledged that for a while. But then I always ask people, I'm like, so Trump got into office and 2 days later, a bunch of fucking cages for kids were built?
Right. Yeah.
An entire infrastructure. These prisons for these kids have board fucking members from the government, from the Obama administration. Them shit didn't pop up out of nowhere. The infrastructure didn't pop up out of nowhere. It was already happening.
But it wasn't mandatory. And that was something that, Jeff Sessions, I know that, unfortunately, even though Trump says, and John Kelly even had said that Trump didn't know about it. They didn't know about it. They were kind of blindsided by Jeff Sessions. Nonetheless, Jeff Sessions was in the Trump administration and Trump as the boss has to take responsibility for that.
But the incentive was still there. The $277 a damn day that each of these places get for keeping these kids. Was already in place. You know what I'm saying? A lot of this stuff is already in place. And Trump might have made things a little worse in some areas.
Yeah.
But he's also made things a little better in other areas. I
think, especially in the very beginning, I think for anybody that steps into that role, especially if you're a political outsider, there is going to be a major learning curve there. And you are going to be trusting the people around you a bit more than maybe you would as your eyes start to open up. And, I think that there's, for anybody who goes into that office in subsequent years, and I think for every president, there's always that learning curve that they have to kind of get over. And unfortunately, they trust people around them. And a lot of times those people are full of shit.
See, the first thing I learned when you get in office is don't trust anybody around you.
I know, but it's so hard because you don't know what's going on, right? I mean, especially if you've never been in politics, you have no idea what the laws even are as far as what you can and cannot do.
The president should probably be the one position that isn't from a political background. I know it's silly, right? I know it sounds crazy, but when I say political background, I mean a political career. I don't mean they don't understand politics. Maybe we should consider having diplomats ambassadors, people who, because the president's most important job is foreign relations and the military. And so we need people who understand the relationships, not only with us and these other nations, but the relationships between the nations themselves.
Yeah.
And the proxies within those nations, like in the Middle East.
We need Tulsi Gabbard. That's what we need.
That's what we fucking need. Oh my God. It's so frustrating because I'm like, we have, you know what? Listen, I guess I'm a feminist. I believe in equity for women. And I even believe in giving some advantages to women because of how much they've been oppressed by men in the patriarchy for as many years as they have been. But like the experience that I had watching Tulsi, who is possibly, at least in my lifetime, and probably for decades after, will be the most qualified presidential candidate in history. Like when they said it about Hillary, that was bullshit. She really wasn't the most qualified. Tulsi is literally, I've never seen, at 38 years old, you're telling me you got somebody who has a military background, a medical background, a political background, local politics,
right.
Legislative politics.
Well, and just not bought.
Not bought, and she, and I won't say she was bought before, but she was at least taking that money, which will give off the appearance that she could have been bought. Then when she realized that it connected to, she was like, you know what? I don't want your money anymore. Then when she was being propped up as president. You know what? If I gotta cheat to get it, I gotta, play the game. I don't want that anymore either. I'll do it my own way. You have somebody who, fought for Julian Assange. If she'll fight for Julian Assange, she'll fight for you. That's how I see it. If she'll fight, if she's suing Hillary Clinton and defending herself, suing Google and defending herself, she'll fight for you. If she's putting people in her campaign that are other outsiders, like, surrogates like you and me, hiring people who she trusted from her local campaigns, and she didn't bring everybody back. And then people don't know she fired a consultant because they were basically asking her to do very establishment political moves. She fired them because she didn't trust them. So she understands the people she has around her. So her administration will likely look like that. It just all around. She didn't piss off Republicans. She wasn't divisive, which was ironic because of her lack of divisiveness, people were really offended by it. It was fucking creepy.
Right.
She says her whole campaign, love, unity, and aloha. Oh my God, she's a fucking crypto fascist.
Right. Which makes no sense.
What? And it's like they
I don't know. People have lost their minds. People have lost their minds.
To the whole, well, she touts her military background. I'm like, yeah, she's proud to serve. It doesn't mean
of course
everything the military is done. I'm proud to live in America. It doesn't mean I'm proud of everything America has done.
Right.
It's common sense. And she talked about that in the Jimmy Dore interview. And that's her identity has been largely shaped by her experiences as a soldier, not by how the United States has defined what soldiers are supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
That's not the same thing. And if that's the only reason you have for disliking her, they say she was a closet Republican because they said talk about her military service, which is easily debunked. They say, oh, her stance on immigration. You mean the exact same stance as Bernie Sanders? Except for but tying in addressing the military industrial complex with that, it's the exact same stance. They said, well, she voted against the Green New Deal. First of all, off act, not even it's not even fucking competition. But also, you mean the same Green New Deal that Bernie Sanders voted against because it didn't go far enough?
Right.
So you start going down the list and you're like, hold up, for all y'all motherfuckers that say y'all support Bernie or even Yang for policy reasons, it seems like you don't actually support anybody or dislike anybody because of policy. It's because of the personality and whatever perspective you've been basically conditioned to take based off of a lot of different factors. Popular opinion, their favorite indie journalists, et cetera, but it cannot be possibly based off of policy. Your dislike or support, or your dislike of Tulsi or support for another candidate over Tulsi can never have been about policy, because you just can't overlook the Securing America's Elections Act. If you say election integrity is such a massive issue, you can't overlook the All Fossil Fuels Act if climate change can't wait. And for me, and probably somebody like yourself, because that has been such a popular topic, for example, I can't overlook the fact that Bernie Sanders talks about climate change can't wait, but said a goddamn, not a damn, nothing, not a shit zip about the OFF Act, despite it being endorsed by before. So now you got to answer for that. For people who say they care about liberties, obviously the whistleblower is a big deal. Fairness in Media Act, working with Trump on the First Step Act, getting Steve Bannon to actually fucking like her. When Steve Bannon is only talked positively about two Democrats, which is Tulsi Gabbard and Bernie
Sanders, right? Yeah.
And everybody, oh man, how could Steve Bannon like her for the same reason he likes Bernie.
Well, and that's the thing that drives me absolutely crazy is this whole guilt by association thing. It's like, oh, well, you must be this horrible person because somebody from the other side likes you. And it's like, or maybe that shows that you can bring people together. Maybe that means that you have a level of common sense and understanding and that you're willing to hear people out and find common ground. Maybe that is what that means, while still holding firm to your values and still holding firm to what is best for America. And that is, anyway, what do you think about the DNC, Joe Biden? Do you think that they will possibly try to replace him before November?
I think it's a possibility. And so obviously right now he has plurality and it's looking like he's going to maintain plurality. And even if he won, it's not like he would be picking his administration anyway. He's already made it clear that he said from day one, he even said, because of my age and probably because of the mental decline too, but he said himself, because of his age, they need to pick a VP who can literally be the president right then and there, which is like, that's usually not the number one thing on most people's lists. But I know people think that it's not. It's who can help me win, who is acceptable enough, who's palatable enough, but doesn't take my shine. Like, that's the criteria for VP. That's why VPs very rarely end up winning the actual president.
Anybody he picks, by the way, is going to take his shine.
Yeah, that guy is literally.
I mean, he just doesn't.
They pick a fucking rock.
Because he can't really. I mean, and it's not his fault if he is suffering from mental decline or dementia. That's not something to at all fault.
To make fun of.
Right?
It's scary, honestly.
It's right, because we can't have a president who's in mental decline. But because of that, it's clear that anybody that is next to him is going to be a better speaker, is going to be more engaging and charismatic. So I think anybody he puts next to him is going to steal his thunder.
So I think that the media
and his job.
Cuomo is a sign that at least they're putting out feelers to see how people would feel.
How could they do it? So I know that they've done this before in history. With Humphrey.
That's funny that you bring that up. They tried. They were prepping to do it when Jesse Jackson was running against Dukakis. And guess who the replacement man was?
Who?
Martin Cuomo.
Oh, interesting.
His dad, Andrew Cuomo.
Interesting.
There's
some history here.
Isn't it? That's how the Democratic Party works, isn't it? It's all a legacy every time. And it's like, you're not even surprised anymore. You're like, of course. But luckily for them, they were able to stop Jesse Jackson from winning, and Dukakis went on to get his ass whooped, as everybody knows. And we're looking at a very similar situation right now. I think that there is a legitimate wing of the Democratic establishment who would rather have Andrew Cuomo. I think that he's been being propped up for quite some time, actually. And all they would have to do is get to the convention and really convince his establishment delegates that we know are kind of given to him. He won them, but like, they're really like, you're the establishment's pick. That's why we picked you. Mm-hmm. So if they get there and there's some willing and dealing behind the scenes that can happen right before the first vote, then they can just peel off. They don't even have to go to anybody else to make it look legitimate. They just said, we don't like Biden's decline right now. We're not comfortable with him. We don't, maybe they don't like Bernie because he's anti-establishment. So you put those delegates, if you wanted to wheel and deal once again, and they'll pay them, by the way.
I don't even think they'd have to wheel and deal, because I think that legally all they'd have to do is get to the convention. And Biden would just say, "I've decided to suspend my campaign."
Option. Right. But I'm talking about the involuntary method.
Okay. So like if Biden's like holding on for dear life and they still want to replace him,
which is a possibility. Okay. Remember, Obama told him not to run and he ran anyway.
Right. So he really wants that.
He wants that title. I mean, losing twice, I think, kind of puts you in a position where you have something to prove to yourself.
Right.
And I mean, let's be honest, right? This is America, and like, if you have every single advantage given to you, like Barack Obama, that shit, you might think they're the same person the way they be acting.
Yeah.
Every time Biden says something, I was in the Obama administration anyway. But with Biden, when you lose twice in America, where you are a white guy who literally had you were a segregationist, and you went from being a segregationist to man, you know, he and Obama are really great together. And he the first black president loved him, and therefore black people love him. Like, he's gotten away with everything.
Yeah.
So the idea that he can't win the presidency, I think, bothers him, like at a very like visceral level. And that's why he's refusing to let it go. But and so in that event, and it's involuntary, the delegates could literally take themselves out of the remove themselves, chill out, be in limbo. But what it does, it takes the ability for Biden to get 51% away from him. And when that happens, it goes to the second round of voting. And unfortunately, you did not have to actually register as a presidential candidate to get the nomination.
When it goes to, because the delegates can just pick whoever they want.
They can literally pick, especially
they can pick whoever they want. Right. Well, actually, everybody becomes a super delegate in the second ballot.
No. Everybody doesn't become a super. So super delegates, their votes literally count for more.
Oh, they do. Okay, I thought it just meant they could go for anybody they wanted.
So there's a misnomer. It's a misnomer in a lot of ways, but there's a misnomer that said, "Oh, Hillary beat Bernie by 3 million votes." But what they fail to talk about is in that popular vote count, super delegates also count for like several thousand popular votes.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Unique voters. Yeah. So that's also not taken into account as well. And so super delegates, you just need a few of them from a few states, and it's over, basically, unfortunately. And so at that point, I think that they would pick Cuomo. But you're right. If Joe Biden gets to the convention, and there's a lot of things they can hold over his head. They can be like, we're going to stop protecting you over the Tara Reade situation. We're going to stop protecting you over Ukraine gate.
Yeah, you got to step aside, buddy. And if they do that, then they could all he could say is, I'm suspending my campaign. I recommend Cuomo. And his delegates would not be bound to vote for Cuomo, but they would be expected to, and most likely would at that point.
And most likely would. But here's the scary part, though. And this is, if they would do this, this would be the strategic thing to do. Biden wins. You just let Biden win. But the reason this is the least likely scenario, I think, is because they don't think he can beat Trump. I don't really believe they think that. Even establishment Democratic operatives that I know that are like, they think that they're progressive, but they're not. They know that he can't beat Trump. They preach everybody to vote for him, but they know in their heart and soul Biden is not really capable of handling 3-4 months of Donald Trump roasting him. And so but this strategy of
they just won't have any debates. I mean, they would just decline everything.
I don't think that Trump would allow it. I don't think Trump would.
I don't know if they have a choice. I don't know if he has a choice.
Could you imagine Biden ducking debates from Donald Trump?
I think that that would be the only
video every day.
That's what he would have to do. There's no other option. He would have to duck and say, no, I'm just going to put out, I'm social distancing, and I'm just going to put out all kinds of, in this day and age with this going on, he's got a reason to just say, no, I don't want to be around. And, I've just decided that I'm going to put out messages to the public via internet.
And you know what most people would say?
Broadcasts.
Well, if you're going to be president, you're going to have to be around other people. I mean, like, that's realistically. I'm just saying,
anybody's going to care. Like you said, Trump derangement syndrome is at an all-time high.
Independents are 44% of this country now. Only 28% Democrat, only 28% Republican, which means if every single Democrat could vote for Biden, and he could still get his ass handed to him. Now, a lot of Democrats are Bernie supporters. A lot of Democrats are Yang supporters. A lot of Democrats are Tulsi supporters, and a lot of them are Marianne Williams supporters. And I know a good portion of all of them are not going anywhere near Joe Biden.
Right.
And so you have to factor that part in too. So you're trying to win people over. Trump is literally Reagan-esque in the eyes of the Republicans now. Like, and people, they don't want to accept this shit, but it's reality. And it's 40, bro, you go through a damn impeachment, 49%. You go through the coronavirus situation. At first, it was like, it dropped him down to like 43, 44%. Then 2 weeks later, like, man, actually, we love the way he's handled it. Back to 49%.
Right.
The man is damn near untouchable.
Right.
And it's, you know what I'm saying? Like, and so you pick Joe Biden to come on, bro. But if he won the convention, and in the unlikely scenario where he beats Donald Trump, then whoever his VP is would get this, and he just says, I can't do this anymore. They get 4 years of that VP. Then because the VP did not run for office, they get to run again twice.
Who do you think he's going to pick?
Stacey Abrams.
That's what I thought too, but that wouldn't really make all that much sense because he's not going to win the South no matter what. And he already has a black vote.
Okay, you're talking about strategy. Come on, Kim. They don't think about this. Is a
But
Democratic.
I don't think they're thinking that. But right, if they're thinking of the next president, I don't know if they would think Stacey Abrams. I think that they would try.
They had her do the rebuttal to Donald Trump for a reason.
True, right? I know that they were grooming, for sure. And I got to say, when I went to Atlanta and I heard her speak in person, she is fantastic at public speaking. She's inspirational. She's presidential in that way. I don't know about her stances, her positions. She's very establishment in my mind. So, she would be kind of the same old. She would be to me like an Obama, right? Where it's like somebody who's seemingly great on camera, excellent, sounds presidential, looks presidential, feels presidential in every way, except all the decisions they make on the back end. What's that?
With less DC experience.
Right. Yeah.
Which is problematic. She works for Center for American Progress. She literally started a nonprofit that basically just supports the Biden campaign. That's basically what they do. And so when you think about it from that perspective, it looks like Biden kind of already made his choice. But I think that there are other options. I think Klobuchar was legitimately an option for a while. I think that Warren at some point became his number one option, which is why
to try to bring in the progressive vote. That would be the idea.
Yeah, and he's dumb because I think he thinks more progressives support Warren than they actually do.
Right.
And I feel like that was a huge misconception.
Plus, I don't think the establishment would allow. I think you're right. They know Biden is probably not going to be the president. In his first term, he's likely to maybe have to resign. It's definitely by his second term. And so they wouldn't want a President Warren. They might think strategically it's good to have Warren in there to bring in the vote. But at the end of the day, they're like, wait a minute. Actually, I still don't think they like her.
They've warmed up to the idea, though. And the reason why is because they saw her being more than willing to throw her entire relationship with Bernie that she's established over the course of a decade.
Right. Okay.
Throw it away immediately.
Right.
And literally try to, because when she said that Bernie said that a woman couldn't beat Trump, that wasn't just trying to end his campaign. You were like trying to destroy the man's legacy.
Yeah.
At that point. That's what the potential.
I think he might go with Kamala.
See, here's the thing about that. I think it's too much baggage. The criminal justice background. It's not like the criminal justice background is bad, but the type that she has combined with Biden's criminal justice background, Trump has been literally preparing to go up against a Kamala and a Biden. He introduced the First Step Act, which helped felons out and it's trying to help reduce the recidivism rate.
Yeah,
he's, what I'm saying? Like there's a lot of, at least, so not literally, he's not actually doing everything he can, but optically, which is the most important thing when you're talking about running a campaign, it looks like he's done more than Biden. And both Biden and Kamala have been unapologetic about their past when it comes to criminal justice. And Kamala lies and says she was a progressive prosecutor, and Trump is probably, out of all the people available, the best opposition researcher out of everybody.
I don't know if anybody cares right now, to be honest with you, Niko. I mean, we've got a woman that's come out saying that Joe Biden sexually assaulted her. And where is everybody? Nowhere to be found. So I don't know if anybody on the left anymore actually cares about whether or not they're a hypocrite.
Well, so the neoliberal left, I would probably agree with you.
Well, of course.
The liberal left is they're like half and half. The progressives have been keying in on the Tara Reade situation pretty heavily.
Yeah, the hypocrisy of this. It's like, hello.
So there are conservatives that at one point might have voted for Joe Biden. But because Fox News has been covering the Tara Reade situation and Joe Biden's silence on this issue, I think that they might not care a lot about it, but it could be like,
especially if they already voted for Trump.
Yeah, they're probably like, I'm just tired of this guy. He's not the right, I could just keep Trump for this. You know what I'm saying? So,
right.
It's,
But I just think that, look, the Democratic Party, I think the Clintons have a lot of power in the Democratic Party. And I think that Kamala Harris, who was very much groomed by Hillary Clinton and very much given Hillary Clinton's support team, that's why I would think that they would still pick Kamala. And she fits the box of being a woman. She's a woman of color, and she comes from a different part of the country than Joe Biden, which is typically what they do is they select somebody from the other side of the country.
I think that there's potential for Kamala, but if they are literally thinking about Kamala, I think that it's a stronger possibility that it will actually be Hillary.
Yeah. But if they were really smart and if they really wanted to energize the base rather than just fueling them off of hatred for Trump, which I think is a big factor, this still would not be a progressive ticket and I still wouldn't vote for it. But if they wanted to get some excitement, they would stick Michelle Obama on that ticket.
Man, look, real
See what
talk.
they would do.
Listen, y'all. I said from the very beginning of this election, I said the entire progressive movement is lucky Michelle Obama did not run. We would not, Bernie, Tulsi, whoever would not have fucking stood a chance.
Right. Michelle would
woman,
house.
She's a better speaker than Obama is.
Right.
She is, believe it or not, people don't know, like, as far as the inner workings of politics, she was more experienced than Obama was. Obama was a junior senator, had literally been in politics for maybe 2 or 3 years, whereas Michelle had been working for the government in Illinois she was worth like millions before Obama ever hit his first million. She was well regarded as that bitch, for lack of a better phrase. And everybody thought it was supposed to be her to run first, but Obama was very, likable, and people kind of had their questions and concerns whether or not a black woman would be accepted at that point, especially one of a darker hue, if you will. But now we're not in a post-racial world, but Michelle now has that type of clout that one gets that becomes post-racial.
Yeah.
Post-racial clout. And if you probably ask the average person, I would say Michelle might be more popular now than Obama is. Because I can't name anything other than her supporting Hillary only for 2016's election, which I think it was kind of obvious that it was because Barack was like, please, just give her this one. And she just never mentioned her again. And then she actually went on to blame Hillary herself for why she lost. So, like, if you can't really dig into Michelle's background, like you can dig into Kamala's, like you can dig into
right. She doesn't have all the baggage. She doesn't have all the baggage.
All the baggage, and honestly,
and she was a beloved first lady. I mean, that's
kids actively helped to craft policy that helped kids. Like and listen, I think she would support Medicare for all, because that's originally what ACA was supposed to be. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I think she would just strengthen Obamacare.
Well,
I mean, she's not going to undermine her, the workings of her husband's signature accomplishment.
She would give us Medicare for all, but she would call it Obamacare. Like, if she would structure the plan that it almost looked something probably closer to what Tulsi was going to present, right? The single.
No, Tulsi's was more like public and private school. Like, we all pay to public school. We can all send our kids to public school. But if you want to spend more money, you can go ahead and send your kid off to a private school.
What I think Michelle would have eventually ended up doing.
I think what she would do, would maybe be something more like the German system. And I actually think Trump might actually be inching towards, he kind of mentioned like expanding Medicare and Medicaid, saying it's not fair.
So he passed the CARES Act. He signed it literally like 2 days ago. Is the most bizarre shit ever, because I'm like, bro, this is why Trump is going to win. This is why he's going to win. He says, so what we're going to do, or his press secretary says, so what we're going to do is, if you don't have insurance or you're underinsured, you get to go to the doctor and be treated for any connection to coronavirus and be tested for free. And we're going to pay through it through the same mechanism we pay for Medicare.
Right. So he just accepted Medicare, and it's like a Republican. Wait a minute.
Like, well, that sounds like Medicare for all. No, it's Medicare for all who have corona. It's Medicare. Right. You're going to see the same, any of the negative consequences that people could argue for Medicare for all, like Bernie's version of it. You're going to see whether your negative consequences hold true right now, because the spike in usage, it's more likely now than if you just introduced Medicare for all 2 years ago without a pandemic. Yeah. Now people are going to take advantage of it. They're going to get tested. They're going to get treated. And you're going to see that supply chain. And so we're going to see. And if you might just end up seeing all the arguments against single payer healthcare get killed because Donald Trump was like, you know what? Fuck this.
Right. Let's just do it. Right.
Well, he called out Pence. He did. In an interview, he said, or in that press briefing, he called out Pence for tiptoeing around a question.
Well, it's because what happened was Trump says, I don't think it's very fair that all these Americans don't have insurance. It's not very fair. So we're going to look into expanding. And then when Pence was asked that question, Pence ran around it for 5 minutes like a Republican would, because of course he's not going to agree to it. And then Trump says, see that? He's a professional.
Yeah, he's a professional. I admire that. He said, but he really didn't answer your question. I was like, what?
Yeah, he didn't answer your question. He's a professional.
he's an interesting character because I don't think that he's evil. I think he's selfish and he's an egomaniac. I don't know if he's an evil
he's a
person.
megalomaniac, but I don't think I think he cares. Look, at the end of the day, yes, we've got a border crisis. It's only going to get much, much, much worse coming up because all these poor countries, they're also having to shelter in place. They cannot afford it. These people are already dirt poor and they were already dying of viruses much worse than this virus. Yes. So those people do not care. They don't care about a virus. They're willing to trek their asses up the continent in order to get to a border. And they're risking their lives. Don't tell me they care about a virus. They don't.
It's about to get worse, by the way, because we just announced that we're about to ramp up military operations in Venezuela.
Well, right. Yep. And so, we're going to see a lot of people at the border. Democrats aren't going to be able to handle that either any differently, really, because it's going to be such a swarm of people. When it comes to the people that are not U.S. citizens, Trump is much harder for sure when it comes to immigration, border security, visas.
Or even if you are a U.S. citizen and you happen to be Muslim.
Then there's that too, for sure. But as far as, what he has been saying all along is, America first, America first, America first. And right now, I think we're seeing in this pandemic the failings of not being America first, where we have moved companies offshore. We've allowed them to go offshore to manufacture all the things we need to keep ourselves protected right now. Are not even made here in America. We have to go begging other countries for supplies.
For our shit made by companies that are literally, they may be incorporated over there, but they're essentially American companies.
Right. And now we're seeing the rooster coming home to roost on this. And it is starting to make Trump look good. To be honest, it's starting to make his policies look like, these are kind of common sense policies that we were all claiming to be racist. And maybe right now they're not looking so racist.
What's interesting is, when you look at, because Trump has introduced and talked about some good ideas, and he isn't the only outsider. I think that Marianne Williamson talking about sick care instead of actual health care. Obviously, Bernie Sanders and his Medicare for all single payer. Andrew Yang with his UBI. I'm pretty sure, if he's not petty, he's probably or if he is petty, he's probably doing a victory lap somewhere like, oh, what happened?
Well, especially Spain. Spain is talking about doing permanent UBI.
And I'm like, I bet he's looking around like, so how that federal jobs guarantee working out for everybody right now that y'all swore was, because I'm a proponent of having both at the same time because of situations like this. Right. But if I had a choice, it'd be fucking UBI because of situations like this. And so you got obviously Tulsi in her advocating for basically everything that all of them are advocating for and then some. It's clear that these ideas that these people were talking about, like they had been saying the entire election, they're common sense ideas. Yeah. They're literally common sense ideas. And when you can have Trump go up and say he supports UBI because he said it before they had even started to introduce it into the legislation act for the stimulus package. He said it already. And it wasn't, oh my God, he's a dirty, rotten socialist.
Right. What happened? Well, that's the thing is right now we're seeing kind of this bizarro world where Trump being a so-called Republican, when he says it, the Republican Party kind of has to go along with it. So he is almost a progressive's last hope right now, right? Like our hope is, and I was having this conversation even with my dad earlier today where, I'm not going to lie. I've warmed slightly to Trump. I'm kind of like, in this crisis, his good qualities are kind of coming out a bit to me. Like some of the things that he stands for that I could see as positives, I'm starting to see them actually, they make more sense to me right now.
I'm comfortable with saying I would rather have him in power right now than Hillary Clinton. I'm comfortable.
Oh yeah, for sure. Right. Yeah. So but the thing this is kind of a complicated argument to make, and I very well could be not accurate, but Trump being he is still not a politician. He's still a political outsider, right? And he is the one person right now, and that's kind of an anti-establishment. He's not, I wouldn't say anti-establishment, but he's definitely not really in the establishment. They just don't really know what to make of him.
I think he likes to play them sometimes. So there are times where he listens to the establishment. So think about how he fires people, right? So he lets them build up a resume of fuck ups.
Right.
Over and over. He says, okay, I'm going to do this. Okay, I'm going to do it. Now, if I get backlash and bullshit because of this, you're going to feel it. And he'll defend it. And he goes ball to the wall to pretend at that time that person like Bolton, for example, has his full support at that moment.
Mhm.
But then when it finally comes down for the get down, he gets to go out and say, you told me to do every mistake that people hate that I did. You told me to do this, and this. And that's why your ass is gone. And no one, even the GOP, can complain about it.
Right. Well, and I think that's what's kind of happened, this constant turnover going on in the White House. It's again that learning curve. He got in there, he had all these people around him that were establishment characters that had been in politics for a really long time. He kind of let them do their thing, and then he'd say, you know what, you're out of here. I don't like you. And that was going on a lot. And that to me was a sign of him sort of saying, in my opinion. What's that?
That's a positive thing, in my opinion.
Right. It's a positive thing. And when I started hearing him talk about, it's not really fair that all these Americans don't have insurance. And then when they say, maybe we send out these checks for everybody, and it was like, holy shit. I started to think, as a progressive myself, I consider myself a progressive, libertarian, independent, right? I sat there and I thought, wait a minute, maybe we've got a chance with this guy. Maybe we can get this guy to go along with certain policies that we've all been for. And this guy, of all of the guys, would have the best chance at actually getting those policies done because he's infiltrating the right. Yeah, because he's infiltrating them and they don't know what to do. And anything he says, his base goes, yeah.
Yep. Oh, everything.
Everything
is so confused.
They are. So he says Medicare for all. They're all going to go, yeah.
Trump was like, we'll never be a socialist country. And then literally months later. So we got to give everybody some checks real quick. All right. I just want everybody to know that. And his base is like, man, that Trump, man, he's introducing some revolutionary solutions right now. Like,
yeah, so you see these things happen and then you start to think, oh my God, everything is shifting in front of my eyes. I don't know what to think. And so today I was saying to my dad, listen, here's what we know. Okay. What we know is we need to get money out of politics. This is the number one problem. We have a country that is run by the corporations. They are buying out our politicians. They are making all the decisions for this country. They control our military and our military operations. Right. The money, the corporations are running us. They run our politics. They run our foreign policy. So if there was a person, if you have to choose between Trump or Biden, for sure, that Biden is not going to get money out of politics. That in reality, he might say,
oh no, he made it clear. Actually, he said, and I'm not making this up, well, if somebody gives me $200,000, I'll be a little bit more inclined to let them in my office. Like, what the fuck? Bro, he said it in a town hall like it was nothing.
Right. So we know, he might say, oh, we should overturn Citizens United. He might say things that he knows are not going to happen. But at the end of the day, I think, I think we can all say confidently, Joe Biden, the chances of him getting money out of politics for real is very low. But imagine a second-term Trump. Imagine second-term Trump leaving politics, knowing he's done and he's not coming back and there's no chance, and he wants to come out really highly loved, and he doesn't give two shits about the establishment or the Republican Party, quite frankly. There is more of a chance that if people started really opening their eyes and screaming about money in politics, which many Republicans are as well, of the base, and then he says, you know what, I'm leaving office. I don't think it's really right that money is controlling our government. I don't think it's really right that they can just kind of do whatever they want, whenever they want. I mean, it might not be likely that he would do that, but there's certainly more of a chance he would do it than Joe Biden.
Yes, there's Trump seems to be one of those people who loves positive reinforcement.
Right, he just loves to be loved.
He has an ego.
He loves to be loved. So whatever the American people want, if it's going to give him love, and if people are going to look at him and say, thank you so much, you're the best, that's what he wants.
Anyone who plasters their fucking name on everything they do, like Trump Tower, Trump golf,
and gilds it in gold.
And gold, goddamn it. She had Trump ties at one point. Trump cuff. Like he
just wants to be
loved. Patted on the back. The reason he started, at least rhetorically, doing a lot of the things that happened, that he did in 2016 and beyond, and that he talked about during the campaign. Why? Because he said some things, and those people in front of him cheered so goddamn loud.
Exactly.
And he was like, I guess this is what
I guess we're building a wall. Build a wall. Build a wall.
This is what we're doing now. Right. If people, and I'm sure that branding has a lot to do with why he backs away from Medicare for all at this juncture, because of it being associated with Bernie. And he admitted Bernie was his biggest competition. And so just strategically speaking, you're not going to put yourself in a position that can force you to concede that this policy is better than what you have put in place right now. But in your, like you said, in your second term, well, then you just get to do what the fuck you want to, don't you?
Anything you want, right? He knows he's not coming back. He just wants to be loved. And I think
when you're in a position like Trump is right now, Trump is in a very unique position, and I don't think people get like how, like you said, we could see something revolutionary, but totally by accident in the second term of Trump. You could see, you could see the closest thing to single payer get passed that we have ever seen, as long as it's introduced, quote unquote, by the GOP, quote unquote.
Right. That's what has to happen. And it's the only way, right? And it really is the only way for us progressives right now to get our policies through is through, crazy enough, through the GOP. If we can convince them, because the Democrats already have to be somewhat on board with this. So if the GOP could be convinced somehow, infiltrated and convinced, then, and they're the ones who bring it up, how are the Democrats going to say no? They can't say no to that.
Mitt Romney introduced the UBI provision that went into that Senate bill. Now he did it because Tulsi introduced it first in the House, but nonetheless, still, that puts them in a position that, and notice the Republicans, not one of them argued against it.
Exactly.
Because Trump supported it.
Right. And the Democrats can't either because it's a Democrat idea. So that's the thing. If Trump, when he starts talking about, it's not very fair. 35 million Americans don't have the insurance to cover this. I don't think it's fair. We're going to work on that. We're going to take care of that. And then does take care of that for this, right? Yeah. Medicare for all. Because, after this pandemic, they might say, okay, we covered people for this pandemic, but what about future pandemics? We really need to get especially now that we are seeing the numbers, we're seeing that Black Americans are disproportionately being affected. We're going to see it's probably Hispanic Americans as well, because anybody who's poor, who cannot afford good health coverage, who cannot afford those early preventative measures, they're the ones who are going to be more at risk for viruses.
I think it's worth mentioning what Trump's qualification was after that, where he said, and it was actually kind of like almost touching, which is weird because I don't really ever get that vibe from him. He said, you know what? It seems like if you're in a position where you have a lot of money, you have a big advantage here. And if you don't have any money, then you don't have any advantage whatsoever. I don't think that's fair. And I was like, what?
I know. I feel like I'm living in a bizarro land right now. I mean, I just don't know what to make of it.
Guess what Biden would have done in this situation? If they would have sent up legislation to do what we're doing right now with Medicare, well, Biden would have motherfucking vetoed that. Oh, we can't do that. You know what the difference is? And it goes back to what you said about money in politics. Trump is a billionaire who doesn't need lobbyist money.
Right. He doesn't care. He just wants to be liked. He just wants to be liked.
He doesn't give a shit about the opinions of the Republicans in Congress because they need him.
Right. They need him more than
in a positive light. You win elections. He decides tomorrow he doesn't fucking like you. You're done.
Yeah. Yeah, he's proven to me at this point, there is a lot I do not like about him. I particularly don't like his pro-Israel. He's very, very pro-Israel, to the point of being overboard. The Democrats they're not really helpful in that situation either, but they're not certainly marching forward an agenda.
The only time they want to attack him is when he does things that are pro-Israel.
Yeah. So those things bother me. There's the deregulation for environmental things bother me a bit. There's definitely a lot of stuff there that just are really, really bothersome.
He toned down on his rhetoric though. Like when it came to him being divisive, like on racial lines and things like that, he's toned that down a lot. I don't know if it's because it's election season or because of what you said. I'm in the second term. I don't gotta pretend to hate these people anymore. I really don't give a like. The truth of the matter is, he's a rich man who gives this much of a shit about everybody who is not as rich as he is. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, my grandma said this, she said it's indiscriminate apathy. Like, she's like, it's whoever is his victim at the time is only his victim because it benefits him for something specific at that time.
Well, not because it's the cheers. He just likes the cheers.
Love the cheers.
But I think what he's turned, what I've noticed throughout his term is he has turned from, build a wall to, China is taking control. China is taking advantage of us. And he's not wrong on that. China is doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah, our corporations work with the Chinese government to take advantage of the federal government and take advantage of us.
And China just owns way too much in America. I mean, we have got a real problem on our hands with how much they own. You know, they own all the AMC theaters. They own Legendary Entertainment. They own the Waldorf Astoria. I mean, shit, they own a lot of stuff. And so,
I'm not surprised. we set ourselves up for that.
Well, because we're a country that America's for sale. America's for sale. And, that is something that, but anyway, I think what he's done is he took a real like lizard brain, right? Where it's just build a wall. We don't want people coming into this country and taking our jobs, right? Like build a wall. They're taking our resources, to kind of channeling and almost turning them to understand that it's not just about Mexico and the wall. It's about just not being taken advantage of just America first. It just goes back to that America first agenda. And again, in a pandemic like this, you start to say, yeah, you know what, guys, he wasn't totally wrong. You know, like we've got a serious problem on our hands with China is stealing technology. They are buying up, they buy our debt, then they take our dollars, then they buy up our land. They own 200,000 acres of farmland. You know, I mean, there's just a lot in our country that China owns, and their ability and the regulations that they put on companies in China. You can't do business with them unless they get the technology from you, and they're going to take the money.
I think there's a caveat that should be made, though. The reason that China has so much disproportionate influence on our economy is because we've put them in a position to do that.
Well, right? We've allowed it. We allow it.
No, I would say that. I would damn near say it's beyond allow. I would say it's like I said, on the business side, there's a lot of quid pro quo that goes on. And then and obviously for any of those businesses that are interacting, they have lobbyists in Washington.
Yeah.
And they allow it. And even I would probably argue they incentivize a lot of this behavior. Right. And it's not right. It isn't right. It's not like I'm saying like, I don't blame China, for example, for taking advantage of an opportunity.
Right. Yeah, you can't, right? That's what they're doing.
Especially because that if you don't take advantage of opportunities that are given to you, America is going to fucking imperialize on your ass, regardless of what you do. And so you gotta kind of establish your foot.
I mean, it's like there are shortcuts built into video games, and they're allowed. You know.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. And that's basically what we're. But at the same time, I am not okay with any other country having such a disproportionate influence on our economy, our government, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And China isn't either, by the way, which is why they're so big on ensuring that American propaganda doesn't get disseminated and our politicians don't have as much influence over their people and things like that. And so
things aren't equal. Things aren't even or equal when it comes to this sort of thing. And and it's not just China. There's many countries taking advantage of us in this way where we're not allowed to do what they're doing over here. And that is extremely problematic. And it is good that he's bringing that to the forefront, that globalization in some ways is good as far as having a more global connected world. We get to go and go to foreign countries and maybe move around a bit and, more freely than we ever have before. But there does need to be some protections put in place for America. There have been a lot of policies that I've always wondered about, why foreign nationals can own any property in the United States. To me, that should not be allowed. It should be leased only, like they do in many other countries, Mexico, Vietnam.
They can literally walk in here, buy, at least $200,000 worth of property, which then turns into an asset, and they get instant citizenship. That's insane.
And then there's that too, right? There's a lot of that stuff going on that does need to change. And his maybe seemingly racist rhetoric is at least shining the light on these really ridiculous allowances that we've done for foreign nationals, for foreign countries. And it's been a real problem.
One of those situations where by the time it's all said and done, it'll be like LBJ, like Lyndon B. Johnson, who was a fucking bleeding heart racist. Like, he was a deep state tool. He was like way insider compared to Trump, but he had that same type of brass personality. But ultimately, despite all that, he ends up signing and pushing for the civil rights amendments. And so we ended up. That's how he's seen now. Everybody forgets he was literally known as a connoisseur of the N-word. That is a quote, a direct quote from the New York Times, a connoisseur of the N-word. Like, he was fucking horrible to black people. Then he passed the Civil Rights Amendment. He was like, people were, when JFK died, people were sad because JFK died, but they were also fucking terrified because Lyndon B. Johnson would be taking over and he was a dickhead. And he ends up passing civil rights amendments, and people till this day, they're like, LBJ, that was a good leader. That's a Democrat.
And it's like, that guy was a bigot, but at least
bigot, bad.
He was a bigot.
And he was an imperialist beyond belief. And he was a corporatist, like all the negatives. But he did that, and like you said, there is a potentiality that if we are just honest in how we are assessing Trump, and we're being objective in our criticisms, but also objective in our support of good policies, that he might pull the wool over everybody's eyes and say, here's Medicare for all, here's UBI, here, I'm going to pull out of this war. He just ended the war in Afghanistan, motherfucker just ended the war in Afghanistan, bro. Are you kidding me?
I know.
Like, you know what I'm saying? There's no way to flip that as a negative.
Right.
You could say some of the trade-offs in Afghanistan itself aren't necessarily good for some of the people, but that was always going to be the case because we should have never been there.
Right.
And so it was always going to be the case.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, and I do think, and I've said this for a while, or at least I've thought it, I do think history will be kinder on the Trump presidency than we might think.
Oh, he'll go down as a act. So Reagan got his allure and luster, but it was fake. It was pushed. Even Democrats at the time, quote unquote, they liked Reagan, and he was seen as this maverick, and but they literally got an actor and say, hey, we just need you to be in the office while we do all this horrible shit behind the scenes and literally steal money from Social Security, to cover down from the shitty trickle down economics. But Trump is a little bit different because he's not an actor who became a successful, politician or businessman. He's a businessman who has
a reality star.
That he ended up an actor and a reality star who was also on WWE, who was also, ran as he actually ran as a Democrat before, but it didn't go well at all. So then he comes back and switches to a Republican, but he was a quote unquote, he was known in New York as a quote unquote good Democrat. But he switches to Republican, and he literally takes out Republican juggernauts, equivalent to somewhat what Bernie did in 2020, shooting aside, none of the candidates seem even close to being viable anymore that are, at least the ones that are establishment. And it's the same thing. I can't think of anybody in the GOP who can run after Donald Trump and even think to have close to the success that he's had, unless they come out and run a Donald Trump type of campaign. And when you set that type of standard, like JFK set going forward with his presentation, you know what I'm saying? Like they say he won because he was younger,
right?
He was good looking, but he was well kempt, and he was considered a family man, and da da da. Like same thing. Trump, the way he campaigns, people on Bernie's side are like, Bernie, be more like Trump.
Yeah, right.
When that happens, you become a staple in the future of politics. And I agree. The reality situation is, regardless of whether or not you're a leftist, you don't like it, Trump is going to go down as the next Reagan. And they're just like there are Reagan Republicans. I think they will be no more. I think they will be Trump Republicans.
Right. I do think so as well. And, it's just definitely been, especially just this election is with the Democrats, the DNC, the treatment of Tulsi, Bernie and Yang, just not liking any outsiders. It's been devastating in so many ways. And I am I'm very big on, I just want the establishment to crumble. And I don't care which side does it.
Yeah. We got to break it down.
Yeah. And, if Trump ends up being the guy right now, that's kind of going against the establishment doing things. And then, you know what? I'm all about just breaking down the establishment, the status quo that we've had for so long between the two sides.
I am nothing if not a pragmatist. I don't give a damn how we arrive at the destination.
Right.
I want to arrive there with the least amount of casualties possible. And I want everybody to get the most that they can get out of it, even if they might be unappreciative of what they're getting. And, sometimes you got to play the ugly game to get the solution get to the conclusion that you want. That's why I always joke. And I've joked with Tulsi, but I say, man, next time you should just run as you should say, fuck it, run as a Republican and get Trump to endorse you. You would literally, and all of a sudden you're getting the Republican. Because once again, if Trump endorses you, if Trump endorsed Tulsi as president, oh my God. Oh, it when you talk about damn the Republican primary, because it wouldn't even be done, it would be over. There would be nobody who could be here in the Republican primary at that point.
Yeah.
But then you go, who the fuck? Who they gonna put up against Tulsi? AOC. AOC. Okay? I dare you, because y'all think that little popularity, because she can hide now. She can hide behind well put together interviews that kind of bolster her good qualities. She hides from Fox News. She hides behind Twitter, and she even has built up a very unhealthy habit of hiding behind her support base, her followers on Twitter. And all that shit goes away when you sit in one-on-one with Major Gabbard on that stage. It goes away.
Right.
And she will expose you. And they're not that far apart in age. They're about 8 years apart. But the life experience, Tulsi's like 60 and AOC is like 23.
Right. Right.
And so
it'll be interesting to see what Tulsi does moving forward. Oh, really? Of Hawaii? Is that what she's going to do?
I think that's what she's going to do. She's criticized the governor more in the last like 2 weeks or 3 weeks than she has done in her entire career.
How interesting.
So that leads me to believe that she's going to try to check one more box off before she runs again, which is being in an executive office. Because, you know, a woman has to do like 8 things more than a man to seem viable. So
well, but governors, I mean, in reality, governors are the best to select from to be the president, because they've basically done that exact job on a smaller scale. That's what a governor is.
And historically, governors win. Historically speaking, governors win and have always won more than Congress people because they generally have a higher profile.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the best job to filter into. It's like being the quarterback of a smaller team, and then you get drafted into the NFL to be a quarterback in the NFL, you know, and that's what, rather than saying, okay, I'm going to be and governors
of tourist destinations seem to find a lot of success in running for president.
Well, good luck to her. I hope she does do that, and I hope she does really, really well.
Governor of a state like that, you know. Right. But, you know, being the governor of Hawaii, I mean, think about it. Reagan came from California.
Right.
Bush came from Texas. Right.
Clinton.
And then Clinton came from Arkansas. So like it's a pretty damn good. Like Obama was an anomaly. People really don't recognize that, but Obama
that the senator, that he wasn't a governor. Well, and also the first Bush.
What was he? Was he governor?
CIA director. Head of the CIA.
Yeah, about that guy.
Right.
Yeah, I mean that's basically like being the governor of the world. But in all seriousness, her being the governor, I think that she feels like it would prepare her better to think on the fly when it comes to domestic policies and solutions for them. Even though she's really good at domestic policy, I think that it may take her a little bit too long, or she becomes too reliant on her advisors to help flush out some of these policies. And I think she wants to have a better handle of them. And I really believe, which I'm sure she does as well, that the best way to know what can work, what should work, what will work is to get down and dirty and see and put it to the test yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that being governor of Hawaii, where they have an interesting economic situation, they have a lot of poverty. They also have a lot of wealthy people, and seeing if you can close that income gap, testing UBI out in your state, because that's a real possibility right now. Playing with things and seeing what works, and then taking that taking that experience combined with your foreign policy experience into another election, and then having that resume domestically where people can't challenge you and say you don't have that experience, and that you're not progressive, or you're not leftist enough, or you're not populist enough, which are all lies, by the way. But with Bernie out of the race, and then Tulsi really, in my opinion, being like the only option left out of everybody, I think that all of a sudden people would start to see the light on both sides of the fence. Hopefully. We'll see.
Well, Niko, thanks for joining the show. This has been fun.
Oh, always. I appreciate you having me on. Is this the first time I've been on your channel? I feel like it might be.
I don't have anybody on my channel, so yes.
I know.
Well, I just barely got set up to be able to do interviews and stuff. It took me a while. And I wanted to, I wanted them to be in person. I kind of got a studio set up for it to be in person, but with, social distancing.
Yeah.
We're doing everything this way.
I like the idea of in-person interviews, but it's all, and honestly more fun, is more energy, and it's like a little bit more.
Yeah, but it's more work.
It's more work.
It's a lot more work.
And then when you're in our situation, you gotta have people up in your crib and shit. It's not like Jimmy. Everybody ain't got a little. By the way, Kim can vouch for this. Jimmy's a whole ass. He keeps saying, "Oh, I'm working out of my little garage in the back." If y'all ever seen Jimmy's garage, bro, that shit ain't no little damn garage.
Yeah, it's been like built out to an awesome studio.
That thing is better than most professional studios.
Wow. Yeah.
Oh, bro, the soundboard is like this. It's like this. I'm looking at him like, bro, how the hell are you doing this? And he has a team for a reason, though. But in all seriousness, appreciate you having me on. And
how do people find you? Tell people how to find you.
So you can find me on Twitter at Niko CSFB. You can also find me on YouTube, obviously, at the MCSC Network with Niko House. You can find me on Rockfin as well, ROKFIN.com/Niko. I love Rockfin the most because, well, they don't do censorship. They take care of their creators first and foremost. I have if you are a premium member already, I know some of your people might be, I have a exclusive every Thursday with Rockfin where I only post on Rockfin, and I have a premium stream that they sponsor every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern to 7 p.m. Eastern.
Oh, that's cool. Well. That's cool. All right, Niko, thank you.
Hey, Kim, if you want to come over to the team, man, they'll take care of you. I'll get you worked out. I'll get you paid now.
I know. All right. Thanks, Niko.